So, Commander Morgan, Admiral Thorne's voice boomed across the hushed combat information center of the USS Vigilance, the sound of blunt instrument in a room built for precision. I've reviewed your file. Systems analyst. Lots of time in labs, lots of time behind a screen. Tell me, what's your confirmed kill count? 0? Maybe 1, if you count a particularly stubborn computer virus. The bridge crew, a mix of seasoned officers and young ensigns, offered a nervous, sycophantic ripple of laughter. They looked at Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Morgan, a small-statured woman whose uniform seemed a size too big, her face impassive, her gaze fixed on the soft, emerald glow of a secondary monitoring console. She offered no reaction, not a flinch, not a flicker of her eyes. Her silence was a vacuum in the high-pressure environment, a stark contrast to the Admiral's blustering performance. He had come aboard for the final day of the massive Neptune's Fury War Games, a peacock inspecting a fleet of eagles, and he had singled her out, the quiet nail that stuck out by being hammered down too far. But on the far side of the bridge, Fleet Master Chief Jacobs, a man whose face was a roadmap of 3 decades at sea, saw something else. He saw the way she stood, a perfect economy of motion. He saw the way her hands rested on the console, not with tension, but with a deep, settled familiarity, like a master craftsman with a lifelong tool. The Admiral saw a pencil pusher. The Master Chief saw a coiled spring. If you believe true strength is measured in results, not volume, type competence in the comments below. The Admiral, pleased with his perceived wit, continued his tour of the CEC, his voice a constant, rolling thunder of self-importance. You see, out here on the sharp end, we deal in kinetics, in steel on steel, not ones and zeros. He gestured vaguely at the main holographic display, where dozens of blue and red icons danced their simulated ballet of war. It's a different world, Commander. A world of instinct, of command presence. Something they don't teach you in a server room. Eve Morgan said nothing. Her fingers traced a diagnostic pattern on her screen, her movements fluid and economical. She was an island of calm in the Admiral's turbulent wake. The ship's captain, Commander Phillips, stood stiffly beside the Admiral, his jaw tight. He knew Morgan's reputation, at least the official, sanitized version of it. She was a fixer sent from Naval Cyber Command to integrate a new, experimental sensor fusion software into the Aegis combat system. Her official role was advisory. Her actual function was to ensure the multi-billion-dollar system didn't crash under the immense strain of the war games. The junior officers, however, only saw what the Admiral wanted them to see, a quiet, unassuming woman being dressed down by a 4-star flag officer. To them, it was a simple power dynamic, a demonstration of the chain of command. They saw her silence as weakness, an inability to defend herself. They mistook her stillness for fear. What they couldn't comprehend was that her silence was a fortress, built brick by brick over a career they couldn't possibly imagine. It was a discipline honed in places where a single spoken word could mean the difference between life and death. Her calm wasn't an absence of emotion. It was a perfect, deliberate control over it. While the Admiral spoke of kinetics, Eve Morgan was running 1,000 silent calculations, her mind sifting through data streams, identifying phantom signals and filtering out electronic noise with the effortless grace of a virtuoso. She was not merely observing the battle. She was perceiving its underlying mathematical soul. The irony, lost on everyone but perhaps the observant Master Chief, was that Admiral Thorne, the man of steel on steel, was the most disconnected person on the bridge. He saw the icons on the map as game pieces. Eve Morgan saw the complex physics they represented, the vectors, the velocities, the subtle energy signatures that betrayed a vessel's true intent. Her world of ones and zeros was infinitely more real than his. The tension on the bridge was a palpable thing, thick and heavy as the deep Atlantic water the Vigilance was currently slicing through. The air hummed with the quiet, powerful thrum of the ship's gas turbine engines, a constant reminder of the immense power held in check beneath their feet. Admiral Thorne continued his monologue, using the war game scenario as his personal stage. He critiqued the tactical action officer's simulated missile launch, questioned the navigator's course correction, and generally spread his aura of abrasive authority like a contagion. Each comment was a performance, designed to reinforce his own perceived importance. And through it all, his gaze kept flicking back to Lieutenant Commander Morgan, as if her quiet refusal to be rattled was a personal affront. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to stammer, to blush, to offer a clumsy defense of her technical background. Her stoicism was a mirror he didn't want to look into. "The problem with you tech types," he declared, his voice rising to address the entire bridge, "is you trust the machine too much. You forget that war is a human endeavor. It's about grit. It's about looking your enemy in the eye." He paused for effect. "You can't do that from a keyboard, can you, Morgan?" Still nothing. Eve's focus remained absolute. She adjusted a filter, her knuckles brushing against a small, worn brass plaque on the edge of her console. It was an old, almost forgotten interface, a relic from a previous system iteration that had been left in place for redundancy. The plaque simply read, "Street Point Michaels Ward." To the rest of the crew, it was a curiosity. To Eve, it was an anchor. Commander Phillips, sensing the escalating discomfort and the dangerous distraction the Admiral was creating, finally interjected. "Admiral, Red Force is initiating their final attack run. A coordinated supersonic cruise missile launch." He pointed to the main display, where a half-dozen red triangles detached from a larger icon representing an enemy cruiser. "This is the main event." The Admiral puffed out his chest. "Excellent. Let's see what this state-of-the-art warship can do. Let's see the kinetics in action." The atmosphere in the CIC shifted instantly. The simulated attack was the climax of the exercise, the ultimate test of the ship's crew and its complex, interwoven systems. Voices became sharp, clipped, professional. "Tio, Aegis is tracking all 6 inbound threats. Firing solution is green. Spy, 1 is locked." The tactical action officer's voice was steady. "Weapons free on my command." The Admiral nodded approvingly. This was what he understood. This was the clean, decisive application of force. He spared one last, dismissive glance at Morgan. Her work, he assumed, was done. The algorithms she had so painstakingly calibrated were now in the hands of the real warriors. He was wrong. The first sign that something was amiss was a flicker, a barely perceptible hesitation in the smooth flow of data across the main screen. Eve Morgan saw it instantly. Her posture, already perfect, stiffened by a single, infinitesimal degree. It was a subtle discord in the symphony of data, a note played just slightly out of key that only a master would notice. The exercise was supposed to be a symphony of controlled chaos, a high-stakes performance where every action was scripted and every outcome, win or lose, was a learning experience. But war, even simulated war, has a way of improvising. As the 6 red icons screamed toward the Vigilance, a 7th appeared. It was a ghost of phantom. It wasn't red or blue. It was a stark, menacing gray, and it moved with a speed and trajectory that didn't match any known missile profile in the exercise parameters. "CIC Tau. I have a 7-track. Designation X-Ray 1. It's not part of the simulation." The officer's voice cracked, the first fissure in the bridge's wall of professional calm. Commander Phillips leaned forward. "Confirm source. Is it a ghost signal? A glitch in the new software?" "Negative, Captain. It's solid, and it's not responding to IFF. It's real." Panic, cold and sharp, began to seep into the room. Admiral Thorne's face went pale. The transition from a game to a genuine crisis was brutally fast. "What is it? A civilian aircraft?" he demanded, his bravado evaporating. "No, sir," the sensor specialist replied, his voice strained. "The profile. It matches a dead stick stealth drone. Hypersonic. No transponder, no emissions. It's flying on pure momentum and glide path. It's a weapon, a dead stick drone. A theoretical threat. A weapon designed to be undetectable, launched from extreme altitude and using gravity and its aerodynamic profile to achieve breathtaking speed without an electronic signature for modern systems to lock onto. It was the perfect assassin, and it was real. The Aegis system, the multi-billion-dollar shield of the fleet, was designed to track and destroy powered, emitting threats. It was trying to get a lock on the drone, but it was like trying to catch smoke in a net. The system kept locking, losing the lock, and locking again, unable to generate a stable firing solution. "Aegis can't track it," the TEO yelled. "The signal is too intermittent." The 6 red missiles from the simulation were now an afterthought, their icons flashing as the automated defense systems notionally engaged them. All eyes were on the gray Phantom, the real-world dagger aimed at the heart of their ship. "Manual override," Phillips commanded. "Give me a firing solution now." The weapons officer worked frantically, his fingers flying across his console. "No good, sir. The targeting parameters are too unstable. It won't accept a manual lock." The drone was now seconds from impact. The invincible warship, the pinnacle of naval technology, was defenseless. The Admiral stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The man of kinetics was paralyzed. In that moment of absolute crisis, as the machine failed and the humans panicked, a single, calm voice cut through the noise. "Captain, I can engage." It was Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Morgan. She hadn't moved from her secondary console, the old relic with the brass plaque. Her voice was steady, devoid of fear. It was the voice of pure, undiluted competence. Every head on the bridge swiveled towards her. The contrast was staggering. The room was a maelstrom of rising panic, shouted orders, and the shrill alarms of a failing system. Yet, Morgan stood in her own pocket of profound silence, her expression as calm as a placid sea. Commander Phillips, his face grim, was out of options. His state-of-the-art systems were useless. His highly trained crew was stymied. Trusting an advisory systems analyst with a relic console was an act of desperation, but desperation was all he had left. "Do it, Commander," he said, his voice tight. Morgan didn't reply with words. Her acknowledgement was the movement of her hands, and it was a sight to behold. Her fingers danced across the old, analog interface of the St. Michael's Ward. This wasn't a keyboard and mouse. This was a panel of physical dials, weighted toggles, and pressure-sensitive sliders. It was a tactile, brutally direct connection to the ship's raw sensor and weapons systems, bypassing the sophisticated but fragile layers of the Aegis software. She wasn't asking the computer to find a solution. She was building one herself from scratch in real time. The narrator's voice would have described it as a master artisan at work. One hand flew across a bank of switches, manually rerouting raw data feeds from 3 separate radar arrays: the main spy, one, a surface search radar, and even the ship's navigation radar. She was layering their disparate inputs, using the processing power of her own mind to stitch together a composite image of the airspace, finding the ghost in the gaps between the machine's blind spots. Her other hand rested on a large, weighted trackball, her thumb making minute adjustments. On her small, monochrome screen, a simple vector line appeared. It was raw, unadorned targeting data. Admiral Thorne stared, his mouth agape. "What is she doing? That's an obsolete interface. It's not even fully integrated." Master Chief Jacobs stepped closer, his voice a low, reverent rumble. "She's not using the integration, Admiral. She's using the source. That system allows for direct manipulation of the CRAM launcher's guidance package. She's painting the target by hand, painting a hypersonic target by hand." It was an impossible feat. It required a level of hand-eye coordination, predictive ability, and intuitive understanding of physics that no training program could teach. It was talent bordering on the supernatural. Eve's eyes were locked on her screen, her focus absolute. She wasn't just tracking where the drone was. She was calculating where it was going to be, factoring in atmospheric density, gravity drop, and the micro-corrections of its control surfaces. She slid a heavy toggle switch forward. "Launcher is slaved. I have a solution." Her voice was still a monotone, a surgeon reporting a critical step. "It's a non-standard ballistic trajectory. Top-down intercept, a top-down intercept." It was madness. Instead of firing the missile to meet the drone head-on, her solution was to launch it almost vertically, letting it climb to a precise apex and then fall like a hawk directly on top of the streaking drone. It was a shot that required impossible timing and precision. "Engage," Phillips breathed. Eve's thumb pressed a single, unlabeled red button on the console. On the deck of the Vigilance, a CRAM missile launcher word, its 21 missile blocks swiveling to an almost 90-degree vertical angle. A plume of fire and smoke erupted, and a single missile shot straight up into the gray Atlantic sky, disappearing into the low clouds. For 3 eternal seconds, there was nothing. Then, high above the ship, a brilliant, silent flash of light. A secondary, larger explosion blossomed as the drone's warhead detonated. The CIC was plunged into a deafening silence. The only sound was the lingering, electronic chirp of the now-clear threat board. The gray icon was gone. They stared at the main screen, then at Morgan. She had already pulled her hands back from the console, her work done. Her posture relaxed back into its state of quiet readiness. The impossible had just happened, and the woman who had made it happen looked as if she had just finished balancing a spreadsheet. The silence that followed was not merely an absence of noise. It was a physical presence, a heavy blanket of shock and awe that smothered every person on the bridge. It was the silence of disbelief, where the human mind struggles to reconcile what it has just witnessed with what it knows to be possible. It was the silence of shattered assumptions, as the entire crew recalibrated their understanding of the quiet woman standing at the forgotten console. It was the silence of profound, dawning respect. Admiral Thorne was the first to break it, but not with his usual booming authority. His voice was a choked, disbelieving whisper. How? How is that possible? No one answered. They were all still looking at Eve Morgan, who was now calmly running a post-action diagnostic on her console, her expression as placid as ever. In that moment of stunned quiet, Fleet Master Chief Jacobs moved. He walked with a purpose that seemed to part the sea of shocked officers. He didn't walk toward Morgan. He didn't walk toward the captain. He walked to the secure access terminal in the corner of the CIC, a terminal reserved for the highest levels of classified information. He placed his thumb on the biometric scanner. The screen flickered to life. He entered a long, complex passcode, his fingers moving with practiced ease. Several layers of security warnings flashed across the screen, each one requiring a separate authorization. The crew watched, confused. What was he doing? Commander Phillips knew. He had seen a Master Chief's expression of dawning recognition earlier. Jacobs had seen something, or rather, remembered something, that no one else had. The final security wall fell. A simple search bar appeared on the screen. Jacobs typed in a single name, Morgan, Evelyn R. The system paused for a moment, the silence on the bridge stretching to an almost unbearable length. Then, a personnel file appeared. But it wasn't the standard Navy file they were all familiar with. This one was stark, black and white, with most of the fields filled with the ominous phrase, classified. Eyes only Jacobs looked up from the screen, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the bridge crew, finally landing on Admiral Thorne. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind of authority that comes not from rank, but from decades of earned respect and knowledge. Admiral, he began, his voice level and cold. You asked the commander about her confirmed kills. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I believe her file might offer some clarification. He turned back to the screen, his finger tracing a line of text that was invisible to the rest of the room. He was not just reading a file. He was unveiling a legend. The entire bridge seemed to lean in, holding its collective breath. The mystery of Lieutenant Commander Morgan was about to be solved. Master Chief Jacobs cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the tomb-like quiet of the CIC. He began to read, his voice a steady, rhythmic cadence that turned a personnel file into a litany of impossible achievements. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Morgan, he began, graduated top of her class, MIT, dual doctorate in quantum physics and systems engineering. A murmur went through the junior officers. That alone was impressive, but it fit the tech-type narrative. Jacobs continued, his voice dropping slightly, taking on a more reverent tone. Declined offers from every major aerospace and tech firm. Direct commission into the United States Navy. Assignment. He paused, looking directly at Admiral Thorne. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The name, DevGru, was not spoken, but it was understood. The unit the world knew as SEAL Team 6. The Admiral's eyes widened. That was impossible. They didn't recruit physicists from MIT. They recruited the hardest men the SEAL teams had to offer. Her specialty is listed as asymmetric threat interdiction and advanced energetics, Jacobs continued, translating the jargon with cold precision. That means she didn't just counter threats, Admiral. She hunted them. The ones our satellites couldn't see and our drones couldn't reach. The ones that existed only as whispers and shadows. He scrolled down the screen. Commendations include the Navy Cross. He let that sink in. The second highest award for valor in combat, with 2 subsequent gold stars, indicating 3 separate awards of the medal. The Silver Star. The Bronze Star with V for Valor Device. The Purple Heart. He trailed off, his eyes scanning a long, long list. The air on the bridge grew thick with a mixture of awe and shame. Every officer, every sailor who had chuckled at the Admiral's joke felt a hot flush of embarrassment. They had been in the presence of a giant and had been utterly blind to it. Then Jacobs arrived at the final critical line item. His voice was barely a whisper, yet it echoed in the cavernous silence. Service record notes 177 confirmed engagements during Operation Phantom Fury. And Admiral, Jacobs looked up, his eyes like chips of granite. Those engagements weren't against ships or software. The Street Point Michaels Ward isn't just the name of her console. It was the call sign for her Overwatch team. She was a designated Tier 1 sniper. The revelation struck the bridge like a physical blow. 177. The number was astronomical, legendary. This quiet, unassuming woman was not just a warrior. She was one of the most lethal and decorated operators in the modern history of the U.S. military. Her kills weren't ones and zeros. They were high-value targets, terrorists, warlords, threats to national security eliminated with terrifying precision from impossible distances. The impossible shot she had just made, painting a hypersonic target by hand, suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. It wasn't a trick of software. It was the muscle memory of a master marksman, applied on a different scale. Jacobs turned off the monitor. He walked slowly, deliberately, across the CIC until he stood directly in front of Eve Morgan, who had finished her diagnostics and was now standing at ease. The Master Chief, a man who had seen everything the Navy could throw at a sailor for 30 years, a man who saluted admirals with professional courtesy, did something no one on that bridge had ever seen. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight, and executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his life. It was a gesture of pure, unadulterated reverence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "My apologies. We were unaware." Eve Morgan finally looked up, her gaze meeting the Master Chief's. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed her features. Not a smile, but a quiet, deep-seated understanding. She returned the salute with a simple, clean gesture. "Your apology is not necessary, Master Chief," she said, her voice soft. "You were doing your duty, as was I." Her eyes then moved past him, settling for a brief moment on the shell-shocked Admiral Thorne. She said nothing more. She didn't have to. Her silence, now fully understood, was more powerful than any words could ever be. The story of the Morgan intercept spread through the USS Vigilance not like wildfire, but like a change in atmosphere pressure. It wasn't loud or gossipy. It was a quiet, pervasive shift in understanding. The tale was told in hushed tones in the mess decks, in whispered conversations in the engineering spaces, and in silent, nodding exchanges on the flight deck. The crew looked at Lieutenant Commander Morgan differently now. They saw her not as an outsider, but as a protector, a guardian angel cloaked in the unassuming guise of a tech specialist. Her quiet presence, once seen as awkward or aloof, was now reinterpreted as the profound calm of a true professional, a warrior who had walked through the fire and emerged with a stillness that no admiral's bluster could ever shake. The junior officers who had laughed at Thorne's joke were the most deeply affected. They avoided her gaze, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and hero worship. They had been given a brutal, unforgettable lesson in one of the Navy's most cherished, if often ignored, adages. Judge a sailor by the quality of their work, not the volume of their voice. Admiral Thorne remained on the bridge for another hour, a statue carved from regret. The swagger was gone, replaced by a heavy, weary stillness. He watched as Morgan calmly briefed Commander Phillips on the nature of the drone, identifying its likely point of origin and its technological vulnerabilities with a precision that was breathtaking. She spoke of stealth laminates and encrypted burst transmitters with the same dispassionate expertise she would later use to explain to the mess chief why the coffee was brewed too weak. To her, it was all just a system, a problem to be analyzed and solved. Before the Admiral departed the ship via helicopter, he did something that cemented the event into the annals of the ship's history. He walked directly to Morgan, in full view of the entire bridge crew, and stood before her. He did not offer a flowery, public apology. His pride wouldn't allow for that. But he did something more meaningful. He looked her in the eye, his own gaze stripped of all its previous arrogance, and said, his voice low and clear, "Commander, your report on the incident. I want on my desk by 0800 tomorrow. Unsanitized." It was a profound act of concession. He was asking for the real story, the classified truth from the woman he had publicly mocked. It was his way of saying, I was wrong. Teach me. He then turned to Commander Phillips and stated, Captain, I am officially recommending Lieutenant Commander Morgan for the Distinguished Service Medal. For her actions today, which, in all likelihood, saved this vessel and everyone on it. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked off the bridge, a lesser man than the one who had walked on, but perhaps for the first time in a long time, a wiser one. The legend had begun. The ripple effects of that day extended far beyond the steel hull of the Vigilance. The official report, classified at the highest levels, sent shockwaves through the Pentagon. The Morgan Intercept became a case study at the Naval War College, a stark example of the critical need to bridge the gap between human intuition and machine logic. The dusty, forgotten Street Point Michaels Ward console, once slated for removal, was now meticulously maintained, its continued presence a monument to the day a single operator had proven more capable than a billion-dollar AI. The story, in its less classified form, became a powerful piece of naval folklore. It was a teaching tool for new ensigns about the dangers of assumption and a reminder for seasoned commanders that the deadliest weapon in any arsenal is a quiet, competent professional. Admiral Thorne, to his credit, embraced his humbling. He became a vocal advocate for programs that identified and cultivated talent in unconventional fields. He was often heard telling younger flag officers, the sailor who can save your fleet might not look like a warrior. They might look like the analyst you just dismissed. He never mentioned Morgan by name in public, but everyone knew who he was talking about. His career took on a new dimension of wisdom and humility, earning him a different, more profound kind of respect than his previous bluster ever had. As for Eve Morgan, she remained unchanged. The adulation and the newfound reverence of the crew seemed to have no effect on her. She deflected all praise with a simple, "The system worked as designed." She spent her remaining time on the Vigilance mentoring a young fire control technician, a shy but brilliant young woman named Ensign Davis. She didn't lecture her on bravery or combat. She taught her how to read schematics, how to find the ghost signals in a data stream, how to listen to the hum of a machine and know when something was wrong. She was teaching her philosophy not with words, but with action. One afternoon, as they were recalibrating a sensor array, Ensign Davis finally worked up the courage to ask the question that burned in the minds of the entire crew. Mom, how did you stay so calm? Eve paused her work, her hands hovering over a tangle of fiber optic cables. She looked at the young ensign, her gaze direct and clear. The mission requires it, she said simply. Panic is a luxury. Competence is a necessity. You focus on the problem in front of you. You execute your function. Everything else is noise. In that moment, Ensign Davis understood. The silence wasn't an absence of feeling. It was the presence of a discipline so total, so absolute, that it left no room for anything else. It was the ultimate expression of professionalism. The lesson was passed on, another link forged in the unbroken chain of naval tradition, a legacy of quiet competence continuing forward. Years passed. The USS Vigilance continued its service, its crew rotating, its technology evolving. But the story of the Morgan Intercept became part of the ship's very soul. New sailors coming aboard would be shown the secondary monitoring station, where the old Street Point Michaels Ward console now sat enshrined behind a polished plexiglass case. A small, new brass plaque had been added beneath the old one. It read, In this station on October 14th, LCDR Evelyn R., Morgan demonstrated that the most powerful weapon system is the mind of a single, dedicated sailor. Let all who serve on this vessel remember. Competence is quiet. The story had become a foundational myth, a touchstone for the ship's identity. It was a reminder that for all the advanced technology, for all the overwhelming firepower, the decisive element would always be the human factor, the unquantifiable, unpredictable, and sometimes unbelievable skill of an individual. The tale was told to midshipmen at Annapolis, a parable about the sin of hubris and the virtue of humility. It was whispered by instructors at Naval Special Warfare Training in Coronado, a testament to the fact that their deadliest operators were not always the biggest or the loudest. The legend of the quiet, unassuming physicist who could shoot down a hypersonic drone by hand served as a permanent corrective to the military's perennial obsession with image over substance. Admiral Thorne eventually retired, a man profoundly changed by his encounter with true competence. His final address to the Naval Academy's graduating class was a powerful speech not about glory or victory, but about the importance of listening, of observing, and of respecting the quiet professionals in any organization. He spoke of the silent strength that holds the Navy together, the unseen work of engineers, analysts, and technicians who are the true bedrock of naval power. He never used her name, but every cadet knew the ghost he was speaking of. And Eve Morgan? She was, as she had always been, a ghost. Her official records showed a transfer to a high-level research and development post at DARPA. But those in the know understood she had simply returned to the shadows, to the quiet, vital work that the nation required of her. She left no statues, no monuments, save for a single, preserved console on a single destroyer. But her true legacy was not in brass or plexiglass. It was in the minds of the sailors she had inspired. It was in the changed perspective of a once arrogant admiral. It was in the institutional memory of a Navy that had been reminded of its most fundamental truth. Her legacy was a standard of excellence, a quiet ideal that would ripple through the fleet for generations to come, a silent, enduring testament to the power of a professional who let her actions speak for her. The ultimate lesson of the Morgan Intercept was not about technology or warfare. It was a deeper, more fundamental truth about human potential. It was a story about the vast, often invisible, reserves of skill and courage that lie dormant within those who are most easily overlooked. Eve Morgan's silence was not a void, it was a shield. It protected a core of competence so intensely focused, so profoundly disciplined, that it required no external validation. Her lack of ego was not a weakness. It was her greatest strength, freeing her from the distractions of pride and performance, allowing her to dedicate every ounce of her formidable intellect to the task at hand. Her unassuming appearance was the perfect camouflage, a deliberate choice that allowed her to observe, to analyze, and to act without the burden of expectation. In a world that increasingly rewards volume over value and charisma over character, her story serves as a powerful counter-narrative. It champions the quiet professional, the silent craftsman, the humble master who finds fulfillment not in applause, but in the flawless execution of their duty. It reminds us that respect is not something to be demanded. It is a consequence, an inevitable byproduct of demonstrated excellence. The legend left behind on the USS Vigilance teaches that assumptions are the enemy of wisdom, and that prejudice is a self-inflicted blindness that prevents us from seeing the giants who walk among us. True legacy is not a list of titles or a collection of awards, as impressive as they may be. True legacy is the standard you set, the knowledge you pass on, the quiet, positive change you imprint upon the culture of your organization. It is the Ensign Davis who goes on to become a master technician herself. Teaching others the philosophy of competence is a necessity. It is the Admiral Thorne who learns to see beyond the uniform to the sailor within. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a glass case. It's what continues forward in the hearts and minds of others, a silent, powerful current that shapes the future long after your name is forgotten. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where professional discipline defines their worth, Subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.